Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our session tonight. Beware of your stories. Rise up, revise, and reach your potential. Thanks so much for being here tonight. I'm joined with Brandon Tell, who's on Facebook currently. He's going to be managing the text chat feature. If and when questions come in, feel free to text chat. Feel free to shoot some questions my way, and Brandon will definitely relay those in my direction. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott Blades. I'm currently learning and organizational development manager for the Bank of Tampa, and I'm also executive director for Rise Up Solutions. Some of you might be thinking, well, wait a second, I thought this was called Story GNV. Aren't these supposed to be presenters from Gainesville? And what's this guy doing from the Tampa Bay area? I just want to tell you not to fear. I have a really long history in the city of Gainesville. Most of my 20-year career was actually spent at the University of Florida. And I worked in a lot of different education and training roles. Plus, my family actually still maintains a residence in Gainesville. So technically, I have dual citizenship between Gainesville and also my new home here in Palm Harbor. So I think I definitely still fit the bill to be part of Story GNV, which I'm really excited about. I think it was 2018, maybe Brandon can correct me, when I first got plugged into Story GNV. I was a participant and just really blown away by the work that Brandon does to really shine a spotlight on the power of story for personal growth and development. That's actually the first place we met. So really just excited to be here tonight to be a presenter. So I wanted to begin tonight by telling you a little bit about my son, Weston. You can see his picture here. And yes, I'm very aware that he is my mini me. People tell me that all the time when I post his picture on Facebook. He's a great kid, just love him to death. He recently passed the 5'4" mark. He's really growing very quickly. He's actually 12 years old. And I wanted to start with him tonight because I think his journey that he's going through right now, I think his response to his journey and some of the things we're talking about with him really relate well to the types of things I'll be talking about tonight in terms of how we approach work, the stories we tell ourselves, and so forth. So I mentioned that currently I'm in a job in Palm Harbor. I recently left Gainesville. And when we started to talk about this as a family, no one was more excited to make that transition than my son, Weston. We were actually a little bit afraid to tell our kids, hey, Dad's got a new job, we're gonna move. And the second we told him we were moving, he was so excited. We were moving right across the street from our family. He was gonna get a chance to see his cousins every day. He would get a chance to see his grandfather and his grandmother pretty much daily. And he was super excited. And then we actually moved, and the excitement continued. He got involved in some school clubs, really thrilled to be meeting some new friends. He's a very social kid. And then the pandemic hit. And it was only 2 weeks after he had really sort of gotten in the swing of school and so forth. And suddenly he was home and he was isolated. And suddenly the reality started to sink in for him that he didn't have access to his friends in Gainesville. He was off to a good start in Palm Harbor, but now, he wasn't, having a chance to meet people. And frankly, he started to get a little bit lonely. And he started to sink into this really negative place where he started to really bemoan the fact that we had moved and so on and so forth. And luckily, I'm married to a wonderful wife. She's beautiful, she's smart, and she told him the best story. And I want to share that story with you. So she basically told him, hey, Weston, I want you to think about a big boiling pot of water. And next to that boiling pot of water, I want you to think about three things. I want you to think of a pile of carrots that are chopped up. I want you to think of a bowl of eggs. And then I want you to think of a bowl of ground coffee beans. And I want you to think about that boiling pot. Now, what happens when you put the carrots in the boiling water? And Wesley gave it some thought. He's like, well, they're going to turn, mushy. They're going to turn soft. And he hates boiled carrots. But yeah, that's right. What happens when you put the eggs in the boiled water? Well, it's a boiled egg. It becomes hard on the outside. Obviously, it's already hard on the outside, but it also becomes hard on the inside. Well, what happens when you take the coffee grounds and you put it in that boiling water? Well, it turns to coffee. Well, what does that smell like? Well, it smells like coffee, and it fills up the room with this amazing smell of coffee. And so my wife looks at my son and she said, right now, you're going through a situation that's kind of like being put into a pot of boiling water. And it's hard. We made this transition. It was good at first, but now the reality is setting in for you that you're grieving. You've lost some things. You've lost some things back in Gainesville. And you're going through a stressful time. You're going through a really trying time right now. And she said, you can either choose to be like the carrots, you can choose to be like the eggs, or you can choose to be like the coffee. And Weston kind of gave her this look like, huh? And she explained, she said, well, some people, when they go through stressful situations, they turn to mush, right? It's hard, it's difficult to deal with, and they just sort of fall apart. They turn soft, they turn mushy, and that's just the way it goes. Some people go through a stressful situation and it hardens them. It turns them hard on the inside. But some people go through a difficult situation and they emanate strength and they emanate positivity. And their aroma, if you will, fills the entire room, and people notice and they say, wow, that's amazing. And she looked at him really seriously and she said, Weston, which one are you? Are you going to be the carrots? Are you going to be the eggs? Or are you going to be like the ground coffee beans? And he gave her this knowing look like, okay, Mom, I get it. I love that story. And I was so appreciative that my wife thought of it in that moment. It was a story I was actually familiar with, but I didn't think to apply it in that case with my son. I was so grateful that she did that. I think it really resonates with me, especially in terms of our topics tonight. We're going to be talking about how we respond to challenges, especially the types of things we encounter at work, whether those things are minor annoyances, major stresses, or even the most life-altering of occurrences. When we're faced with those stressful situations, we can turn to mush, we can become hard on the inside, or we can be the type of people who really, again, like emanate strength and positivity and really change our surroundings for the better. So the thrust of our session tonight is really to explore a variety of strategies that will help us navigate our challenges constructively and really be the best versions of ourselves. So if I could have a mantra for tonight's session, it would be, hey, how do we be more like the beans? So with that in mind, we have a few objectives we'll look at. We're gonna really get to a place, and some of these might be just refresher types of things. Maybe we need a reminder of some of these things. Maybe I'll give you a few new things for your toolkit. But we really want you to be able to recognize the key causes of stress and the negative effects on health and work performance. I want you to be able to explain the resilience and grit strategies of the world's most mentally strong people. There's really some great literature out there in terms of studying incredibly mentally strong people and what are their characteristics. We're going to unpack that a little bit. I think as we go through those characteristics, you'll see yourself in some of those characteristics. And maybe in some cases you don't see yourself, and that's a good way to sort of look in the mirror. We're going to explore the destructive beliefs that are holding you back from your best. And we're also going to apply strategies to quote unquote revise your story and approach your work with greater energy and enthusiasm. So the first thing I want to talk about, maybe this could be a chance to engage on Facebook. Maybe you can send Brandon Telg a few messages out there in the land of Facebook. What do you think the top 3 causes of stress are? So if you just want to send those in the text chat, maybe Brandon can chime in and tell me if anyone's out there and anyone's participating in the text chat. So I'll give you maybe 30 seconds to do that. And then I'll do a little survey says action here, and we'll take a look at what some of the literature has to say about some of the top causes of stress, just broadly speaking.
So I will say that that there are a couple of people watching, but there's also a delay. So,
okay. So we'll give people
30 seconds might be a little bit longer.
And welcome. Thanks so much for joining. If you want to send us your name too, I'd love to say hello and say out my name. I was under no illusion that this would be a huge crowd, but I was excited to connect with a few folks tonight.
So we have one participant has listed loss of a loved one,
okay.
moving, and loss of a job.
Okay. Yeah, definitely all very stressful for sure.
Another person, sorry, do you want me to just keep listing them out?
Oh yeah, go for it. Yep.
Financial. Oh, it was just financial.
financial, and financial. Yeah, absolutely. And often it's noted that, you know, when relationships struggle, whether those are partnerships or marriages, often finances is at the root of those struggles for sure. All right, so let's take a look at this. So according to the literature out there, survey says some of the top causes of stress, yes, money, right at the top of the list. Whoever said finance, way to go. You hit the nail on the head. Work is a huge cause of stress, especially if you lose a job. Someone mentioned that. Health problems, if you're going through a difficult health crisis, maybe it's a life and death situation, or maybe it's chronic pain. There could be a number of things that can cause you to have a major stressful response. And some of the other heavy hitters were things like parenting, just being too busy, and personal relationships. And I remember coming across this literature, and at the time when I was putting this presentation together, actually for work and actually also for this conference, I remember thinking, wow, we are going through all of those things right now as a result of the pandemic. I think it's worth noting that all of the things we're experiencing right now with the pandemic, it's sort of a perfect storm in terms of people being very stressed out. I mean, it taps into our fears about money, especially if you're being furloughed, or you've lost your job because of businesses being inaccessible and things of that nature. It taps into fears about our health, obviously. I mean, it's a pandemic, people are getting sick. In some cases, people are unfortunately dying. For those of us who are parents, we also were stressed about the new responsibility of, in some cases, homeschooling our kids. I saw a great post on Facebook where someone said, we have to stop thinking about it as homeschooling. We need to start thinking about it as crisis schooling. And I know for me, that was a helpful mental shift for me to think about it in a different sort of light. So there was that stressful aspect that was adding to our already very busy schedules. And that in turn affected our personal relationships. We're more likely to operate in efficiency mode and be more hot-tempered. One of the saddest statistics I came across recently was that there's actually been an uptick in domestic violence because of the pandemic, having to live in close quarters, having to be around people more often. There's not much of an escape route if you're upset. We're in pseudo quarantine situations and so forth. So, simply put, the coronavirus pandemic is really a perfect storm for creating stress. So we're just kind of surrounded by all of these types of things. Now, most of you are probably aware that when we're stressed, it really creates a fight or flight response. I love this picture. I think it really tells the story of what it means to experience fight or flight. When you're in a stressful situation, your body launches a physical response. Your nervous system springs into action, releasing hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, that really prepare us for that fight or flight response. You'll notice that your heartbeat speeds up, your breathing gets faster, your muscles get tense, and you actually start to sweat. And this type of stress is a good thing. It's meant to protect you. It's like if I'm about to get run over by a motorcycle, that's a really good response to have, because that adrenaline will help me to leap out of the way of the motorcycle. But the problem is when we have that type of stressful response for a very long period of time, that's when we get into all sorts of difficult things with our health. So this chart here, think of this as like the green light. These are actually good things. So if you have that acute stress response, it increases your blood sugar, your attention gets really focused, your blood pressure raises temporarily, you have a decreased sensitivity, preparing you for possible pain, a decrease in serotonin making you very serious, and temporary suppressed immunity. All those things are good because that helps you to fight in that moment where you're very stressed. Now, this next one, think of that as the yellow light. Green light, yellow light, red light. These are telling your body, hey, time to slow down, man. You've got an intense headache, increased fatigue, difficulty sleeping, trouble focusing, upset stomach, and just general irritability. All of those are signs that you need to slow down. You need to have a different response to the situations you're encountering. And when your stress gets really bad, think of this as like a red light. That's when we can get into mental health issues, heart conditions, digestive challenges, weight changes, asthma and arthritis, skin problems. All of these things are your body's way of saying, stop. Whatever situation you're in, you've got to escape from that. You've got to get away from it. It's reached a place where you're actually really endangering yourself. So I think that's kind of a helpful framework to think about in terms of just listening to your body, listening to your responses to situations. Is it a green light? Is it a good thing to have that moment of stress where it kind of, brings out your best performance at work, or, helps you to keep safety? Is it telling you to slow down, or is it telling you just to stop and get away from that situation? So with that in mind, and this is another chance to chime in on Facebook, I would really love to hear maybe some stress management heroes. And when I think of stress management heroes, I'm thinking about people who have encountered something stressful in their lives, maybe a difficult situation at work or a relationship, or overcoming a health challenge. Obviously, this would be easier to talk about if we were, in a live chat, but if anyone wants to shoot a quick note in Facebook, that's fine. Or Brandon, if you have an example, we'd all love to hear it. Of course, I have an example too that I can of course share, but any stress management heroes out there. And the reason I bring this up is, again, I've been in education and training for the past 20 years, and I found that, one of the most powerful ways to develop a skill set is to really study role models and then work to imitate their behavior. So I think it's good at this point in the session to sort of have, a mental model of someone who does this really well that maybe you could be thinking about for the rest of the session. So any thoughts on that?
Well, while we give some folks some time to catch up with the delay, I would say that for me, since you called me out, I think to my father, actually, as an example of this, someone who has managed to, have a big career at the University of Florida, an academic career, while managing having kids and a wife, and I can't really remember times where he let his stress get to me, and my sister. He controlled it very well and modeled what dealing with a lot of intense things all at once looks like without projecting all over everyone else, if that makes sense. And we did have an example come in. Eastern sorry, go ahead.
That's fantastic.
Eastern philosophers and Stoicism authors was added in the chat.
Yeah, I love the reference to Stoicism. Actually, the example I was thinking about for my own, I could think of a number of people in my circle, if you will, who I would consider a stress management hero. The one who comes to mind is actually my best friend's father. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us. He passed away recently. And he was always so stoic, and when people gave eulogies about my best friend's father, they often talked about how he was always just so cool under pressure. And I believe it was my best friend's brother who told the story about how one time they were flying down the highway in Delaware, and it was during a snowstorm. And I shouldn't say they were flying, they were just driving down the highway. And he started to lose control of the vehicle. And even in a situation like that, where they were in incredible danger, and his wife was in the passenger seat, and she was really very emotional about it. She was yelling, Bill, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he just remained calm the entire time, and they completely veered off the road. They ended up in some field somewhere, and he just had control of himself the entire time. And I remember listening to that story and thinking, wow, I don't know if I would have acted that way. And I remember leaving that funeral service and just being really convicted by those stories of, wow, here's someone who had some really significant health challenges. And even in situations where his, was in immediate danger, he was able to really control his response. So I always think of him as sort of this stoic person. I don't know that he was a person who practiced stoicism, but he, in my mind at least, he was definitely someone who was very stoic, very calm, cool and collected individual. So he's definitely one of my stress management heroes. All right. So,
sorry, there's one more quote that I wanted to add that's in the chat. From Epictetus, I guess is how you'd pronounce it. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it reminds me of Viktor Frankl, the idea of like stimulus and response, like you get to choose your response. There's a distance between stimulus and response. And the only thing we really get to choose in life is our response to stuff. The only thing I really own is my response. I don't really, all this stuff around me could be taken away. My health could be taken away. I could be injured by someone else. But the only thing I really own in this life is my response to my circumstances. So there's such power in that quote. And thank you for sharing that, for sure. All right, excellent. Thank you so much for participating, folks. I appreciate the insights. Next thing I want to talk about was mental toughness. There's a great book out. I highly recommend it. It's 13 things mentally strong people don't do. And I found this interesting because oftentimes in success literature or leadership literature, it's always what you should do. And this was more about like, don't do this. Like people who are really mentally strong don't do these types of things. And I wanted to sort of just quickly go through those. So this is Amy Morin, a really fascinating story as to why she wrote this book. She went through a very difficult chapter. I'm not going to ruin the book for you. You have to read it yourself. But really just a series of very bad things happened to her. And as a result of those really difficult circumstances, she really started to study mental strength. And this is the research that she put out. So one of the top things that mentally strong people don't do is they don't waste time feeling sorry for themselves. You know, and the story that pops into my mind is I started my new job at the Bank of Tampa a few months ago, and a couple weeks into it, feeling kind of stressed. Like we had some construction going on in our new house, and I was kind of like ruminating about some of the things we had to work out, and schedules and things like that. And I was kind of just feeling kind of agitated. And I was walking down Bayshore Boulevard in Tampa, a really beautiful stretch of road, and the bays right there. And there I was surrounded by this beautiful scenery, but I was inside my own head, and I was kind of frustrated. And lo and behold, this guy in a wheelchair like comes rolling towards me, and he's pumping his arms. And as he gets close to me, he looks me dead in the eye and just gives me the brightest, most genuine smile I had seen all week. And I remember thinking, wow, like there's a guy who could probably feel sorry for himself. I mean, he's in a wheelchair, he can't walk, but he is just enjoying his day and just like completely rocking out on his wheelchair. And I remember that moment, like my mind completely shifted to the beautiful scenery and just how incredibly fortunate I was to be walking down the road that day. So they don't waste time feeling sorry for themselves. They don't give away their power. And I love this one in particular because oftentimes, and this happens to me too, I'm a human being just like anyone else, but oftentimes when I'm coaching professionals or coaching leaders, there's this notion of, oh, well, my direct reports are driving me crazy, or my boss is driving me nuts. And that's an example of giving away your power. When you say that someone else is driving you crazy or someone else is driving you nuts, you are giving them all the power. And in reality, you have the choice to hold on to your power in that situation and say, no one is allowed to make me feel that way. I'm the only person who can make myself feel that way. So if they're doing something negative towards you, you're the one who's making the choice to feel bad about it. You could just ignore it. You could choose to have a positive response. And by letting them drive you crazy, quote unquote, you're actually giving them all of your power. So mentally strong people don't give away their power. Mentally strong people don't shy away from change. Instead, they actually welcome it because they know it's inevitable. I mean, the only thing that's, the only thing we know things are going to change. I mean, it's inevitable. Every day we wake up, we can expect that the world to go around. Things are going to be constantly changing. So mentally strong people are willing to be flexible and believe in their abilities to adapt to change. They don't waste energy on things they can't control. So you'll never hear a mentally strong person complaining over lost luggage or traffic jams. So they focus on what they can control in their lives. They recognize that, hey, sometimes the only thing I can control is my attitude. Stephen Covey, who's famous leadership author, would call this the circle of influence and circle of concern. We're going to dig into that a little bit later. But in other words, mentally strong people only focus on situations they can actually exert influence over. Everything else falls in the circle of concern, and they just don't worry about that stuff quite as much. They don't worry about pleasing everyone. Mentally strong people recognize that they don't need to please everyone all the time. They're not afraid to say no or speak up when necessary. And they strive to be kind, they're fair, but they can handle other people being upset if they didn't make them happy. They're able to let that roll off their back much more quickly than mentally weaker people. They also don't fear taking calculated risks. They're not reckless and not foolish, but they will take the time to really think things through and take calculated risks. They'll spend time weighing the risks and benefits before making a big decision. And once they're fully informed of potential downsides, then they'll be more likely to take an action or veer in a different direction. They also don't dwell on the past, right? They don't let the constant, movie just play over and over and over again. Oh gosh, that person wronged me last year. I'm going to replay that trauma over and over and over again. They don't waste time on those types of, relived experiences. They certainly learn from past failures, but they're able to, put that in the past and focus more on the present and the future. They also don't make the same mistakes over and over. Mentally strong people, really learn from their past mistakes. As a result, they don't keep repeating those mistakes. Instead, they move on and make better decisions in the future. They also don't resent other people's success. Some of you may have come across the notion of like an abundance mentality. Someone who has an abundance mentality says, hey, there's enough success to go around. I can be on a team. I can work in a large organization. If all these people over there in that department are really, really successful, that's fantastic. There's still enough success to go around for me to be successful. I'm not going to resent that person for being good at what he does. These are also the type of leaders who really want their direct reports to be ridiculously successful, and they don't feel like that takes anything away from them. Often when I coach leaders, I use the example of, it's not your job to be Michael Jordan anymore. You're not supposed to be the star basketball player. Your job now is to hire Michael Jordans. You're supposed to be surrounded by people who are really, really talented and doing really, really great things, and have the mindset that there's enough success to go around for all those people in your organization. So mentally strong people don't resent other people's success. They also don't give up after the first failure. Instead they look at failure as an opportunity to grow and improve. They're willing to keep trying until they get it right. They don't fear being alone. They don't fear being alone with their thoughts. They don't, think of being alone as, a reflection that they're a terrible person. Oh gosh, I'm home by myself on a Friday night. That's okay. Like a mentally strong person would be totally fine with that. These are the type of people who can go to a restaurant, go to Chipotle, order food, just sit by themselves and like be totally fine. They don't fear that alone time. They also don't feel like the world owes them anything. Oh gosh, because I've been through such difficult things in the past, like I'm really owed this promotion, or, because, I was born in this city, or because, so-and-so was nasty to me last year, like I deserve this. Like they don't think that way. They instead just put forth their best effort, and they realize that, life is going to happen and hopefully things work out. And if it doesn't, it's not like I'm owed something just because I'm me. And they also don't expect immediate results. This is the last one. So in other words, they recognize that real change and success takes time and practice. You'll never find a mentally strong person trying to engage in some type of get rich quick scheme, because they just recognize that that's ridiculous. It's not going to immediately happen for me. True success is the result of concerted effort over time, lots of practice, going about things with integrity. So they don't expect like quick satisfaction or quick and immediate success or quick results. So I thought that was really fascinating. I think in terms of what we're talking about tonight, in terms of the stories we tell ourselves, how to really navigate our stress, I thought that was really interesting study from Amy Morin related to what's up with the most mentally strong people. If I could imitate some of the most mentally strong people on planet Earth, like what would that look like? And she really provides a really great guide for what that looks like. All right, so with that in mind, I want to turn our attention now to what I would call 3 mental toughness models. Often they're not talked about in terms of mental toughness, but this is how I think about them. One you might be familiar with, maybe this is just a quick review, and I mentioned it earlier. It's Stephen Covey's circle of concern and circle of influence. So a circle of concern encompasses the wide range of concerns we have, such as our health or children, problems at work, the amount of government borrowing, threats of war. And a circle of influence encompasses those concerns that we can actually do something about. So these are concerns that we have some control over. So highly effective people focus on issues within their circle of influence. They work on the things that they can actually do something about. So the nature of their energy in doing this is really, it's really focused, in that particular circle. So take a look at this list here. So I mentioned things like personal health, world hunger, clean drinking water, issues at work, looming deadlines, relationship issues, threat of war, the stock market, kids misbehaving. All right, so which ones do you have the most influence over? So if you want to use the text chat feature in Facebook, if you look at this list, maybe which 1 or 2 do you feel like you have some influence over? If you could just jot that down, maybe Brandon, if you want to let us know, or if Brandon, you want to jump in and give me your thoughts on it in the meantime, that's cool too.
Sorry, I was in the middle of multiple comment thread sort of managing. So I am keeping an eye out for any responses that come in. Let's see. I've got multiple tabs open, sorry.
I actually thought you had muted yourself. I was like, he's talking to me right now, and he doesn't realize that he's muted.
So a couple of things in the chat: personal health, relationship issues.
Yeah, absolutely. With personal health, we can definitely influence that, right? We can choose the types of things that we eat. I can choose to get up in the morning and go for a bike ride. I can choose to be like Brandon Telg and jump on the elliptical during my lunch break. I mean, I can influence my personal health to a great extent. And relationship issues, yeah. I mean, I can choose my response during an argument. I can choose to, show love and kindness to someone, on a daily basis. I can certainly influence the nature of that relationship for sure. Any other ones jump out? Yeah.
I just realized, sorry, that my mic wasn't muted and I had one of the videos of you in one of my tabs going. So sorry, you might want to repeat that.
Oh, well, I was just saying the two that someone mentioned on the text chat were right on the money. Personal health, we can certainly influence that by the choices we make in terms of what we eat and how we exercise. And in terms of relationship issues, absolutely. I mean, we can choose to show up in a certain way in that relationship. We can choose a response. We can choose to show love and kindness. We can choose to do nice things for someone. So absolutely.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and remute myself.
Okay. So yeah, really, really good points there. I would say some other ones that we can certainly influence are things like issues at work or looming deadlines, when kids misbehaving, issues at work. We show up to work every day. You can choose your response to those types of things. You can have a meaningful talk with your boss. You can, have a heart-to-heart with a teammate. Looming deadlines, well, gosh, can I negotiate that? Yeah, you probably have some power to negotiate that. A lot of times people just relent and say, oh gosh, I'm just a victim to my circumstances. You can choose to work harder. You can choose to work more efficiently. You can certainly, influence those types of situations. Kids misbehaving, we certainly can't control our kids. We can certainly influence them, with rewards or punishments or just heart-to-heart conversations and so forth. So one of the interesting things about the circle of influence or mentally strong people is if you just focus on the things that you can actually influence, you'll get better results. And as a result of getting those better results, you will actually grow in influence. What tends to happen to us at work when we're at our worst is we get so sidetracked by the things that are in the circle of concern that it spreads us so thin that we actually can't move the needle on our goals. We can't move the needle on getting good results. We've really vaporized our ability to make an impact. So if you choose a fewer number of things and you just focus on the things that you really can influence and change, you're more likely to get better results, which in turn will develop you into a better professional. It'll, build your credibility. It builds your influence. And as a result of that, you'll probably get more responsibilities. You'll get promotions and so on and so forth. So it's a really good mental model to consider if you're not getting the results you want at work, or if you're feeling just stressed out all the time. What are some things you can just cut away so you can get more laser beam focused on the things that you can definitely influence? All right. So here's another list. Finding a cure for the coronavirus, keeping my family members healthy, getting a raise, unsafe drivers, and my attitude about my coworkers. Which of these things can you influence over time? Well, I've saved this until the end on purpose because in this life, there's really only one thing we really can control, and that's ourselves. And this segues really nicely into our next model. So if you look at this list, we really can't control most of these things. The only thing you can actually control, is really my attitude about my coworkers. So that's why the circle of control is the smallest. It's because the only thing we can really control is ourselves. All right. Trying to flip ahead here, but it's freezing up on this. Give me 1 second. There we go. All right. So the next mental strength model I wanted to talk about was this notion of the belief window. This comes from the author Hiram Smith. You should check him out. He's a little bit more, it's not as famous as like a Stephen Covey, but a lot of the same types of principles. But one of my favorite things from Hiram Smith is this idea of the belief window. And the belief window really breaks down like this. I mean, imagine you're going through life and you've got this window in front of your face. And on that window, you have written certain beliefs, you know, about the world, about yourself, about other people. And those beliefs are based on your experiences, based on your education. It's based on, you know, basically the life that you've lived. And as a result of looking through life through that belief window, you are naturally going to behave in certain ways because of those beliefs. So let me break this down through some fun examples. I'll use some musical examples. I know Brandon Telg is really into music. You might not know this musical reference, Brandon. I don't think this is your music. But Luke Bryan, he had this song out. And the only reason I know this is because my wife is really into country music. I'm actually not a big country music fan. But he had this song out maybe a year or two ago called I Believe Most People Are Good. All right, so let's suppose that he really does believe that. And I would imagine he does if he wrote a song about it and sings it. I believe most people are good. So as he goes about life and he encounters people, you know, he meets people on the road, he shakes people's hands, he hears their stories, he's going to be more likely to be open and nice to those people because he believes, you know, even if someone's kind of annoying or nasty, I believe that at the heart, most people are good people. That's a positive belief. All right, what about this belief? All right, this comes from Rockwell. Maybe you know this song from the 80s. You know, he says, I always feel like somebody's watching me. All right, well, that's kind of a paranoid belief. Right? So if he literally believes that, like he's always like, gosh, I always feel like someone's, you know, looking at me, or you know, someone's always watching me. I always feel like I'm kind of under a microscope. He's naturally going to bring, you know, that thinking into his behavior. He's going to, you know, act out in certain ways that are as a result of that belief. So when he looks through that particular window, it's going to look more like this. Like life, his experiences are going to have kind of a dark cloud hanging over them. And the final example comes from Axl Rose. You know, welcome to the jungle. It gets worse here every day. Well, that's a pretty negative belief. Right? I mean, you know, he wrote this song about Los Angeles in like the mid 80s, you know, welcome to the jungle. It's just a terrible place to live. People are always out for themselves. It's very rough out there. Yeah, I mean, if that's your belief, as you encounter people, as you interact with, you know, situations and so forth, you know, life is going to look like this. You know, so what's powerful about this idea of the belief window is if you're having a really stressful response at work, you know, really the first response to that is to really think about some of the things that you're writing on your belief window. Oh my gosh, you know, like the people I'm working with, they're just so difficult. Well, that's a belief. Like you've written that belief on your window, and now anything that they do is going to be viewed through that lens. You know, think of your belief window as the lens you're looking at, that you're looking through when you experience your life. So one of the things that I want you to think about, like a key takeaway in terms of the belief window, is the most mentally strong people have healthy belief windows. You know, if you think about the 13 things that we just went over, another way to think about that is if you're a mentally strong person, you have a very you know, healthy belief window. You have healthy beliefs about yourself. You have healthy beliefs about other people. You have healthy beliefs about the world. So this is the key takeaway. You know, positive beliefs are really the key to mental strength. You know, I think oftentimes when we think of strong people, we think, oh, they're so hard, you know, they're really tough, you know, like they're tough as nails. And it's actually really much the opposite of that. Like the strongest people out there have figured out a way to be very positive despite their circumstances. Positive beliefs about myself, positive beliefs about other people, positive beliefs about the world. That's the key to mental strength. Here's a perfect example. You know, if I believe that I'm a terrible public speaker and an audience is something to be feared, I'll experience stress at the very thought of having to give a presentation. However, if I force myself to speak up more in public settings, I'll likely discover that it's not as scary as I thought. Each time I try this, I'll hopefully gain more confidence in myself and also realize that people aren't nearly as harsh as I thought. Oh gosh, I'm actually my own worst critic. These people out there in the audience, they're actually much nicer than I would imagine, right? So my positive experiments will gradually, you know, shift my beliefs about public speaking and my behaviors will naturally follow suit. So I would really encourage you, if you're stressed out about something at work, step one, really take a step back, think about, what do I believe about this situation? What do I believe about myself? What do I believe about other people? What do I believe about the world? And it might be time to reevaluate some of those beliefs. Maybe write a different belief on your belief window, and then, put some experiments in place, where you can test out that new belief. And it's very likely that you'll find new evidence that can support that new belief and create a much less stressful response and actually create better results for yourself. All right. So here is a quick case study. So Brandon, I'm going to ask you to...
Before you jump into the case study, this is a moment to ask a question. In the comments, somebody asked, is this a recommended text by Hiram Smith? And it is a Amazon link to a book called The Power of Perception.
It's not. And I'm going to have to, I might have to go to the bookshelf, and I should have it in my notes, but I don't. It's actually a longer title. It's like the 9 principles of like life management or something. Like, I'm actually embarrassed that I don't have the title memorized. I love the best part of that book is the belief window.
Are you talking about the 10 natural laws of successful time and life management?
Yes. Thank you for saving me.
That's okay. I just opened another tab in Amazon. So.
It was 9 or 10 of something. I read that book about 10 years ago, and the one part I teach out of that book is the belief window. So I do apologize for not remembering the title, but thank you for finding it, because it's an excellent read. So definitely consider checking that out. Any other questions?
I'll ask them as they come in, but there is a delay, so we might want to jump into the case study.
So what I'd like to do now is I'd like for us to read through this case study, and I'd like for us to look at it. You know what? We've got 15 minutes to go, and I want to make sure I get to the next mental model. So why don't we're going to skip this case study, and instead I want to take a look at the last mental model, because I think this is the most tactical of the models that I'm going to share with you tonight. So I'm just going to sort of blaze through this case study. This is the last one I want to talk about. And in this case, I actually do have the title of the book on the slide, so go me. This one's called Reality-Based Leadership, and it comes from an author, her name's Cy Wakeman. And I think this quote really summarizes the real thrust of that book. She says, stress is not caused by what happens to us. It is caused by the stories we tell ourselves about what happens to us. Often these stories have no bearing on reality, and the truth is much less unpleasant than what we have imagined in our minds. So here's an example of how this can play out. So suppose you're in an office environment and you're working really hard, you feel like you're doing a great job, and your coworker gets a promotion. This guy who's got the jacket over his shoulder, he gets a promotion. All right, the reality is that's just a fact, right? He got a promotion, fact. But what happens, because we're people, is we look at that fact and we attach a story to that promotion. And those stories could be, various, right? One story could be, well, gosh, I am always overlooked while others are rewarded. I do all the work and idiots like him get all the glory. This place is all about sucking up, and that's why I'll never get ahead. All right, those are all stories we can tell ourselves. Maybe there's some truth to that story, but maybe there's not. All right, but the reality is it's just a fact. This is a person, this person got a promotion. So what do you think would be the actions and results of this team if every member of that organization is telling themselves that type of negative story? Well, the actions and results that will follow those types of stories will naturally be bad. All right, there's not going to be as much engagement. People might start backbiting each other. These things will become sort of a downward spiral. So what are some actions and results that you can predict? Well, yeah, they're all the things we just talked about. So do you think they're going to be as likely to collaborate with this person? Probably not, right? Because there's jealousy or there's resentment. So yeah, things like tension, lack of collaboration, exhaustion, slow rate of work, dissatisfied customers. So what's scary is that this is really very common in workplaces around the world. So there was a Gallup poll that came out that showed that 71% of employees are disengaged to the point that they consider quitting their job about once a day. That's nearly 2/3 of the employee population. It may sound like a crazy number, and it would be if these employees were actually quitting. The truth is much worse. They're continuing to report to work and collect a paycheck, but mentally and emotionally, they are clocked out. It's scary to think about. Actually, as someone who's been in leadership positions for a while at this point, I've been in leadership positions for 10 years. It's scary to think that a lot of people who are in the workforce are actually just not very engaged and even contemplate quitting on a regular basis. And as coworkers and as leaders, we have to really be mindful of that. How do we treat people with respect? How do we get people excited about work and engaged and so forth? How do I tell myself the right story, and how can I get other people to be thinking about the right stories as they approach their work? So here's an interesting model. So again, this comes from Cy Wakeman. She says, here's the general progression of how we experience life. An event happens, it's a fact. But after we experience that event, we think about that event in a certain way, and then we feel a certain way about that event. And those things determine our actions, and those things just determine our results. So these two right here, between event and action, I mentioned earlier, stimulus, response. We've got that space, right? And in between that space, we've got how we think about something, how we feel about something. And that's going to determine what our response is. That's going to often determine what choices we make. And if you're in that thinking and feeling stage and you're concocting stories that are really very harsh and negative, I love this meme. It says, call Kenny Loggins because you're in the danger zone, right? If you're telling yourself a negative story, you're very likely to have a very negative action and very negative results coming from that. So if we can hit the pause button in that moment, if we can think more clearly, if we can think more positively, if we can choose a better response, peace and productivity really come with the end of drama. This is something that Cy Wakeman talks about a lot in this book, is this notion that so much stress that we experience, especially in the workplace, is self-inflicted. And so much of it is because we're generating drama that does not have to be there. If we just dealt with the facts of the situation and chose to help rather than judge, we'd all be a lot more at peace, and we'd all be a lot more productive. So I love that dichotomy that she puts in play. She says you can either choose to help or you can choose to judge. Which one do you want to be? Do you want to be the person who's helpful, or do you want to be the person who's judgmental? And we have that choice every single day in terms of everything that we encounter, not only at work, but also in life. So here is a series of questions that she outlines that I think are very powerful. She says, when you're at work, respond to the facts, not to the story that you're telling yourself. So you have to ask yourself questions like, hey, I'm experiencing something stressful. What do I believe in this moment? So again, think, what's on my belief window? And then the second question is, what do I know for sure? Like, what facts can I actually verify? Who am I when I believe this story that I'm telling myself? Oh, gosh, it's so political around here. The only reason so-and-so got that promotion is because that person always sucks up. Well, who are you being right now when you believe that type of story? Are you at your best when you're believing that type of negative narrative? Without this story, if I were to divorce myself from the story and just think about the facts of the situation, what would I do to help? How would I show up to that situation? How would I be the best version of myself? Number 5, how can I actually help? Right? Well, gosh, this person got a promotion. What's the next thing to do in that situation? Hey, how about just congratulating that person and saying, hey, let me know what I can do to help. In fact, I've got this idea already for how I can help you be successful, or maybe we can be successful together. That's the better choice. And then finally, what is the very next thing I can do to add value right now? Because let's face it, folks, I'm not adding value when I'm choosing to believe a negative narrative. I'm not adding value when I choose to act out in negative ways because I've adopted that negative narrative. I'm not helping myself. I'm not helping the people around me if I'm choosing to be that way. So what's the very next thing I can do in this situation right now to add value as opposed to take value out of my team? So really powerful questions. So we do have time for this case study. I'm gonna read through this case study. Actually, Brandon, if you could read the yellow slide. I've got a red slide, a yellow slide, and a blue slide. We'll just get a different voice in the mix here.
All right.
If you could read the yellow slide. So we're going to read through this case study, and then we're going to just kind of go through those questions together that Cy Wakeman recommends in terms of like really just recalibrating ourselves to reality and choosing our best response. All right. So this is Eddie. Eddie is an IT professional, and Eddie is acting a certain way at work, and we're going to help Eddie sort of like recalibrate to reality and choose a better response. Here we go. All right, I'll read this first one. So Eddie is an IT specialist at a major company. He has a great reputation as a go-to professional with excellent technical skills. 6 months ago, he played a key role in implementing a new HR platform. Members of the HR team have hailed him as a hero for improving their internal processes. Some employees of the company, however, have struggled with the change and have been calling the HR team repeatedly to report the same technical issues and challenges. They report 2 issues in particular.
Issue 1. The browser that offers the best performance of the platform is Google Chrome. This is stated on the homepage of the platform, but some users are still logging in with outdated versions of Internet Explorer, and this is causing them to experience technical difficulties. Issue 2. When users click a submit button on the time reporting page, the platform is supposed to open a new window. However, some users have pop-up blockers activated in their browsers that are preventing this window from displaying. The software alerts end users of the problem with a message, "A pop-up blocker is preventing your access. Please click the go button to continue." However, this message is buried at the bottom, so people aren't using the go button as a workaround.
The HR team approaches Eddie with these issues. Eddie states, "Look, I've been in IT a long time, and there's one thing I've learned. It's that some people are just computer illiterate. I can't help it if people can't read crystal clear messages telling them which browsers to use or how to click a go button to work around a pop-up blocker." The HR team continues to attempt to make their case for some system optimizations, but Eddie continues to insist that there isn't much he can do since people at this company are so tech challenged and will find anything to complain about. Okay, so obviously this is a negative response. All right, so there's a problem. People are approaching Eddie, attempting to get his buy-in for some fixes or some additional workarounds, and he just kind of throws his hands up and says, "Look, people are basically idiots. They're computer illiterate. I can't help it if they can't read. I'm out." That's basically his response. So let's use the Cy Wakeman model to help Eddie edit his story. All right, so let's suppose you're Eddie and we're asking you these questions. So what are you choosing to believe in this moment? Well, what is a belief that Eddie has written across his belief window? Brandon, do you want to give this one a shot?
Yes, I just commented in the chat, as a former IT person, I apologize to the world for having had this opinion of people at times.
Let me tell you, this is not a characterization of all IT people. I've met so many great IT people over the years, but I have occasionally come across someone like this who's like, "Well, people are just idiots."
So I think that Eddie and myself in the past have chosen to believe that it's the other person's fault, that they're just, nothing I do is going to change anything, and that I might as well not even try to learn anymore because my past experience has told me that it's something that they're missing rather than something that I can maybe help them with.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so with that in mind, that's the belief that Eddie has written on his belief window. He's behaving in a certain way because of that belief. So now we're going to take it to step 2, which is, well, let's just recalibrate to reality. All right, so what are the facts of the situation? All right, so the facts are, hey, there's a certain percentage of the population that's not seeing the message that says you should use a different browser. And there's also a certain population that is not seeing that go button at the bottom of the screen, right? Those are the facts. All right, let's move on. So who are you when you believe the story that you're telling yourself? Brandon, do you want to play Eddie? Tell us who you are.
When I believe the story that I'm telling myself, I am essentially not a helper. I'm essentially the arbiter of who is intelligent and who isn't. I'm not entirely sure if they're like that's what I think the answer is. What do you think?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, you're essentially, you're right. You're sitting as a judge, right? You're deciding who's smart and who's not.
Yeah.
Do you really want to be that person? And you're also, you're basically being an obstacle. People are struggling and people are coming to you for help and you're refusing to help. Do you really want to be that type of person? Do you want to be an obstacle and also a really judgmental person who's saying this person's stupid, this person's smart? That's essentially who Eddie's being by believing his own story in that moment, right? So now the next question is, without this story, and again, the story is all these people are stupid, most people are computer illiterate, there's nothing I can do to help. If you were to just put that story on the shelf, like think of it as a book that you just put back on the shelf, what would you do to actually help? If you kind of got over yourself and just did something helpful, what would that look like? All right, so I'll prime the pump a little bit. One would be, hey, maybe that message that says you need to switch browsers, maybe that needs to be in bigger font. Maybe that needs to be higher up on the page. Would it kill you, Eddie, to maybe make that message a little bit more pronounced? I mean, some people are still probably going to miss it, but maybe there's a way for us to make that message even bolder so that more people won't miss it, right? With that in mind, is there anything we can do with the go button? Well, yeah, if it's buried at the bottom of the screen, maybe there's a way to reformat that page so that it's, again, more obvious to people that this is your workaround. Hey, you've been blocked by this pop-up, like it's right at the top of the screen. Maybe it's flashing, or there's things that he could certainly do that could at least help the situation. It won't necessarily solve it, but it could at least be more helpful. How can you actually help? All right. Based on his reputation, based on the fact that he's this great IT person, there's a good chance that he can recode that page or reformat that page to actually be helpful. And then the final question for Eddie is, what is the very next thing you can do to add value? And if you really thought about that realistically, if you really recalibrated to reality, there's a good chance that maybe he can't get to it today or tomorrow, but maybe he can get to that next week or maybe next month. Realistically, when could you get to the task where maybe you could reformat that page or what have you to actually add value and make things better? So I hope what you're hearing in this series of questions is a way to, to coach another individual, but more importantly, like we can use these questions on ourselves. Again, like if you feel stressed, there's a good chance that you're telling yourself a very negative story. And again, maybe there's some truth to that story, but oftentimes we really blow things out of proportion when we're emotional about things, when we're under the gun, when we're stressed out. So this is a really good series of questions to just kind of like dial it back. What am I choosing to believe right now? What are the actual facts of the situation? Who am I when I believe this story? Without this story, how would I be more helpful? What can I actually do? What's my next step to add value? A really powerful set of questions to just kind of recalibrate ourselves to being the best versions of ourselves.
I want to add, there's a little bit of commentary in the chat. Somebody added, I think this relates to Eddie's situation. Another text I appreciate is Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last, and his philosophy of taking care of one's team members and listening to their needs, i.e. putting one's own needs after theirs, which is a fantastic metaphor for great management style, which inspires one's team members to return to work each day because they know they are cared for and their opinions are considered. Also, Eddie needs to complete some instructional design work.
In terms of like the instructions on that page, the message design and so forth. So yeah, really, really good comment there. I'm guessing that person is an instructional designer. That's good stuff. So I just want to do a quick recap. Looks like we're right on the dot for 9 o'clock. So we timed this out pretty well. So hey, we spent tonight really reviewing the key causes of stress and the negative effects on health and performance. Again, think green light, yellow light, red light. Really listen to your thoughts, listen to your bodies to really figure out where you are on that stress spectrum. We also spent tonight explaining the resilience and grit strategies of the world's most mentally strong people. And we also spent tonight reflecting on challenges and reviewing ways to respond to difficult situations with those 3 mental toughness models that we talked about. So circle of influence, circle of concern, the belief window, and then the Cy Wakeman sort of, 6-question model of, really, she calls it reality-based leadership. So just basing your leadership, basing your response really in reality, grounding yourself in reality and letting that drive more positive responses in the workplace or really in life. So thank you so much for being here. I wanted to just kind of bookend this with our picture of the coffee. Again, I think of that great story my wife told my son. You know, when we're facing stressful situations, we can be like the carrots and turn to mush. We can become hard on the inside like a boiled egg, or we can make the choice to be more like the coffee and really emanate strength, emanate positivity. And when we choose to be more like the coffee beans, we're much more likely to get the positive results that we're desiring and really have a much more peaceful and productive existence at work. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I had a lot of fun. Of course, it's always great to connect with Brandon Tell, who's just a fantastic human being. And really happy that some people were able to join the conversation tonight. So again, my name's Scott Blades. Please feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached at swblades@gmail.com. So swblades@gmail.com. I do individual consultation work. I also give presentations around the nation. So would love to work with you and your team if you're in need of any professional development services or leadership development. Thanks again for being here. And at this point, if anyone wants to ask me any questions, I'll certainly take them. And if not, we'll sign off. And again, thanks for participating tonight.
We did get a comment that says, "Thank you, Scott and Brandon."
All right. Thank you.
I'm thinking that probably the best way to handle this is that if anybody does have any questions or comments, to add them to the comment thread on this video, and we'll respond to them.
All right, that sounds good to me. Well, thanks again, everybody, and have a really great evening, have a great weekend, and best of luck. Take care, everybody.
All right.